The storm came out of nowhere, one of those desert tempests that didn't just darken the sky, but swallowed it whole. Sand whipped across the Arizona territory like shards of glass. The wind howled through the canyons, bending mesquite trees sideways and dragging dust devils across the open plain. And in the middle of it all, stumbling through the chaos like a man half alive, walked Elias Boone. His hat was long gone, torn from his head miles back. His lips were cracked, dry as river stones. The sun, before the storm clouds smothered it, had roasted him until his skin peeled. He'd been out here 3 days, maybe 4. Time blurred when a man carried nothing but grief and a half-empty canteen. Elias wasn't running from something. He was running away from himself. The image of his younger brother, collapsed in that mining tunnel, still burned behind his eyes. Elias had pulled him out with his own hands, dirt, rocks, and broken timber cutting into his palms, but it was too late. His brother's eyes were lifeless, and Elias had sworn he'd never go near a mine again, never touch another shovel or pickaxe, never chase treasure as long as he lived. But the frontier had a cruel irony. A man could hate gold with his soul, but still starve without it. Lightning cracked across the sky. The flash showed a landscape of red cliffs and jagged rock. Elias stumbled toward a narrow cut between the canyon walls. Any shelter was better than standing in the open where the storm could flay him alive. Inside the canyon, the wind softened, replaced by a deep, brooding silence. He leaned against a rock wall, chest heaving. The air still tasted like dust, but at least he could breathe. His boots scraped over loose gravel as he moved deeper. This canyon, it didn't look natural. The walls were carved smooth, almost polished. And the further Elias walked, the more he felt something strange, an energy, a vibration in the air, like the earth itself was watching him. At the end of the canyon, he found a narrow opening barely wide enough to squeeze through. He pushed inside. What he found on the other side stole what breath he had left. A hidden hollow, a sacred space, a place untouched by white hands. The ground was arranged with stones in carefully placed patterns. Painted symbols marked the walls, white spirals, red handprints, black lightning bolts. In the center lay a flat slab of rock, and atop it, a small leather pouch. Elias approached cautiously. His heart thudded, partly from exhaustion, partly from fear he couldn't name. He untied the pouch. Gold. Thick, heavy flakes of river-worn gold. Enough to buy a ranch. Enough to buy 10. His broken life flashed before him. His brother's burial, his empty pockets, the night spent hungry in ramshackle saloons. This gold could fix everything. He could walk out of this canyon a rich man. But as soon as that thought flickered through his mind, another, darker presence filled the hollow. He lifted his eyes. There were mourning markings drawn around the slab. Apache symbols of remembrance. Symbols of the dead. This wasn't a treasure stash. This was a grave offering. A sacred trust. Elias felt the air shift behind him. Not wind. Not storm. Something else. Someone else. He didn't turn around. He didn't need to. He could feel eyes on him. Sharp, silent, unblinking. A hunter's gaze. A guardian's gaze. Slowly, he closed the pouch. His hands trembled. Not from fear, but from the weight of the decision he was about to make. He placed the gold back on the stone. Stepped away. Hands raised, open palms. His voice cracked when he spoke. "I ain't talking it," he whispered. "Ain't mine." The silence grew thicker. Elias could hear his own heartbeat, feel the storm raging outside the canyon like another world entirely. Here, inside this sacred hollow, time felt suspended. He backed toward the opening, never turning his back to the watcher he could not see. When he finally stepped into the wider canyon, the wind hit him again, but softer now, as though the desert itself approved of his choice. Lightning flashed. On the cliff above the hollow stood a figure, tall, still, a silhouette cut from the storm's fury. Long hair whipped behind him, and in his hand, a spear glinted with rain. Their eyes met for only a heartbeat. Elias nodded once, a gesture of respect. The warrior didn't move, didn't threaten, didn't speak. He simply watched the cowboy walk away from the gold, as though memorizing the face of a man who had chosen honor when no one was watching. Elias would remember that moment for the rest of his life. But he had no idea. The Apache warrior would remember it too. And 13 years later, that memory would change Elias Boone's fate forever. The storm had passed by morning, leaving the desert washed clean and strangely quiet. Elias Boone walked until the canyon walls gave way to open land again. He had no direction, only the memory of that Apache warrior watching him like a ghost carved from thunder. By noon, his canteen was empty. By sundown, he felt his legs buckling beneath him. The next thing he remembered was waking on a rough cot inside a wooden outpost, the smell of coffee and old timber mixing in the air. "Easy," a gruff voice said. "You were near about dead when my boy found you." Elias blinked up at Jed Rourke, the wiry owner of a trading post that sat lonely between two dry washes. His son, a teenager barely strong enough to swing a rifle, hovered behind him. "You Apache country," Jed continued. "Lucky you ain't full of arrows." Elias kept his expression calm. He wouldn't mention the sacred hollow. He wouldn't mention the gold. Some things were better buried. "I'm looking for work," he murmured. "A bed. A meal if you can spare one." Jed snorted. "Ain't we all? But I need hands. You swing an axe. I can swing anything." And that's how Elias stayed. Days turned to weeks. He hauled lumber, repaired fences, kept bandits at bay, drove livestock to nearby ranches. The work was grueling, the pay meager, but he didn't complain. Hard labor kept his mind from drifting back to the canyon. The spirals painted on the walls, the gold glinting under storm light, the silent warrior watching him leave it behind. But life on the frontier never stayed simple for long. Rumors began swirling in the settlements, the kind of whispers that made men greedy and stupid. Apache got treasure hid in the mountains, some said. Buried war gold, others claimed. Elias felt a cold prickle crawl up his spine every time he heard it. He kept his head down, kept to his chores, but didn't take long for trouble to sniff him out. One morning, while repairing the corral fence, Elias sensed movement beyond the cottonwoods. He stood slowly, eyes narrow. Just shadows, just silence. But he wasn't alone. A faint glint, sunlight slipping off a metal blade, caught his attention. Someone was crouched beneath the trees. Elias didn't reach for his gun. Instead, he walked straight toward the well, dipped the bucket, and took a long swig. His hand never shook. His eyes never betrayed what he'd seen. He remembered the sacred hollow. He remembered the warrior who watched him. So he whispered under his breath, "I know you're there." He felt it then, a presence, a watcher, a guardian, calm but alert. Later that night, as Elias locked the trading post doors, Jed scowled at him. "You hear about the deserters?" "No. They're sniffing around, looking for anyone who might know something about Apache gold." Jed lowered his voice. "You didn't see anything out there in them cliffs, did ya?" Elias met his gaze steadily. "No, sir. Just sand and sky." Jed grunted. "Good. Deserters ain't the forgive and forget type." But those deserters wouldn't be Elias's only problem. 2 days later, trouble came in the form of a flash flood. The sky darkened without warning, and thunder rolled through the canyons like cannon fire. Elias had been out repairing a stretch of fence a mile from the post when the first water rushed through the wash. "Damn," he muttered. Flash floods in Arizona were worse than bullets. They came fast, without mercy. He scrambled on a higher ground, boots slipping in the mud. The wash roared beneath him, turning into a churning brown river. A shout cut through the storm. Elias spun. Someone was on the opposite bank, a figure in buckskins, hair whipping in the wind, one hand braced against a twisted mesquite tree. It was the Apache warrior, the same one from the canyon. Their eyes locked again across the raging water. A sudden crack echoed, with snapping. The tree the warrior clung to tore loose. He was thrown into the torrent, arms flailing. Elias didn't think. He didn't hesitate. He jumped. The water hit him like a stampede. It rolled him under, slamming him into rocks. But he fought, kicking to the surface, trying to spot the warrior. Another surge lifted them both, hurling them downstream. Elias reached out, fingers brushing against an arm. He grabbed hold, clinging tight as the current dragged them along. The two men, Cowboy and warrior, crashed against a boulder. Elias clawed up the rock, hauling the warrior with him. They collapsed on the bank, coughing river water, chests heaving. For the first time, the warrior spoke. His voice was low, steady. "You could have let me die." Elias wiped mud from his face. "Ain't the kind of man I am." The warrior studied him for a long moment, rain dripping from his braided hair. "I am Takoda," he said finally. "It means friend to all." Elias nodded. "Elias Boone." Takoda's expression didn't change, but his eyes softened, just barely. Their fragile bond was born that day, built on survival rather than words. But the frontier wasn't done testing them. That night, while Elias slept in a small cabin near the post, the door creaked open. He woke instantly, hand reaching for his revolver, only to find Takoda standing in the doorway, silent as a shadow. "Men come," Takoda said. "White men. 5. They look for you." Elias's blood chilled. "Deserters. They think you know sacred land," Takoda said. "They will not ask. They will take." Before Elias could answer, a shot rang out. Wood shattered above his head. The deserters were already here. Takoda grabbed Elias's arm and pulled him through the rear window. They hit the dirt running, boots thudding in the dark as gunfire cracked behind them. They sprinted toward the rocky ridge behind the trading post. More shots echoed. A bullet grazed Elias's shoulder, spinning him sideways. Takoda caught him before he fell. "You run," he ordered. Elias gritted his teeth. "Not leaving you." The two men ducked behind a boulder as the deserters closed in. Shapes moved through the mesquites, 4 no, 5 shadows, rifles raised. Elias breathed hard, pain burning down his arm. Takoda signaled subtly. One enemy was moving closer than the others. Too close. Elias didn't want to kill again, but survival demanded choices. When the deserter lunged forward, Elias tackled him, knocking the rifle aside. They rolled across the dirt. A second deserter aimed a pistol, only to drop suddenly, struck by a thrown Apache spear. Takoda moved like lightning. When it was over, the remaining deserters fled into the night, and Elias collapsed to his knees, clutching his bleeding shoulder. Takoda knelt beside him. "You saved my brother from the water," he said softly. "Now I save you." And in that moment, Elias realized something. Takoda wasn't just a watcher. He was becoming something far more dangerous and far more rare. On the wild frontier, a friend. The desert night was heavy with silence, broken only by the faint rustle of wind through the mesquite. Elias Boone had thought the worst was behind him, but the frontier had other plans. It started before dawn. A rough hand gripped his shoulder, yanking him from his sleep. Cold steel pressed against his ribs. "Move!" a voice snarled. Elias didn't resist. One by one, the deserters, men hardened by war and greed, dragged him through the darkness, their boots thudding against the rocky ground. His shoulder throbbed, but pain was nothing compared to fear. They didn't speak. No questions. No mercy. Only the one thing they wanted: directions to the sacred canyon. Elias stayed silent. Hours bled into a tense march. The deserters mocked him, jabbing at his pride, trying to break him with words and intimidation. But nothing pierced the wall of resolve Elias had built over 13 years of frontier hardship. He had survived storms, hunger, and death. A few desperate men wouldn't make him betray the Apache. Eventually, they brought him to a clearing surrounded by jagged cliffs, a place Elias didn't recognize. They tied him to a post, leaving him exposed to the dawn chill. The leader, a scarred veteran named Clayton Pike, circled him like a predator. "You're going to tell us where the treasure is," Pike growled. "I don't care how much blood it takes. Start talking." Elias met Pike's gaze evenly. "I don't know what you're talking about." Pike's hand lashed out, striking Elias across the face. Pain exploded, but Elias held his ground. "You're stubborn," Pike muttered. "Good. Makes it more fun." Hours passed with the sun rising high overhead. Elias's lips were cracked, his vision blurred, but still he said nothing. His mind drifted back to the canyon, to the hollow and the gold, and to the silent guardian who had watched him leave it. "I will not betray them," he told himself. "Not for anything." And then, just when despair threatened to consume him, a shadow passed over the clearing. Elias squinted, trying to make out the figure in the bright sun. Tuckoda. His presence was like a storm itself, silent, unstoppable, inevitable. He moved with precision, dispatching 2 guards before they could raise an alarm. With a hand signal, Elias understood. Escape. Tuckoda's actions were swift and lethal, yet controlled. Every strike, every step, calculated. Elias felt the adrenaline surge through his veins, numbing the pain in his shoulder. They moved through the cliffs, Tuckoda leading silently. The deserters were close behind, yelling and firing rifles. Bullets kicked up dirt at their feet. A boulder crashed down, cutting off pursuit. For a moment, the world was nothing but pounding hearts, adrenaline, and the rhythm of survival. But the deserters weren't finished. Pike had brought reinforcements. A trap lay ahead, a narrow ledge, a sheer drop to jagged rocks below. Tuckoda stopped, signaling Elias to halt. "Jump," he said, voice calm but commanding. Elias hesitated. He measured the distance. Death waited below, but he trusted Tuckoda. With a deep breath, he lunged. Tuckoda followed immediately, landing hard but steady. The deserters fired, but the cliff shielded them. For hours, they navigated the mountains, hiding in caves, scaling rocks, moving silently. Elias's mind raced, each step replaying his brother's death, his failures, his past mistakes. He had always believed he was too weak to survive the frontier, too flawed to earn trust. Yet here he was, alive, moving alongside a man who had once been a silent watcher. When they finally reached a hidden canyon, a place Elias recognized instantly, he knew they had crossed into the sacred land. It was a hollow carved by wind and time, cliffs rising like guardians, shadows deep as night. Tuckoda turned to him. "You've kept your word," he said. "That matters." Elias swallowed hard. "I couldn't have done anything else." The deserters found them at last. Pike and his men burst into the hollow, rifles raised, shouting. The final showdown had come. Elias's heart pounded. He reached for his revolver, but Tuckoda shook his head. "Not yet," the warrior warned. "Wait for the moment." The deserters charged. Tuckoda moved like a shadow, disarming and disabling with lethal precision. Elias followed, firing when necessary. One by one, the men fell or fled. Pike, the scarred leader, came at Elias with a knife, eyes wild with rage. The fight was brutal. Elias sidestepped, ducked, rolled, and finally, with a desperate lunge, shoved Pike off the edge of the cliff. Pike's scream echoed, then fell silent as the rocks swallowed him. When the dust settled, Elias was shaking, covered in cuts and blood, his own and the deserters'. Tuckoda stood nearby, calm but watchful. They were alive. Tuckoda's eyes softened. "You are stronger than you know," he said. "Stronger than I first thought." Elias sank to the ground, exhausted. He looked at Tuckoda. For the first time, he felt something deeper than respect, deeper than gratitude. He felt trust. "Why?" Elias asked, voice rasping. "Why help me?" Tuckoda didn't answer immediately. He pointed to the cliffs above, toward the sacred hollow. "Because some things are worth protecting. Not for gold, not for glory, for honor." Elias's chest tightened. He remembered that day, 13 years ago, leaving the gold behind. That single act of restraint had defined him more than any treasure could. And now, facing death and survival, he understood. Sometimes the right choice wasn't the easy one. They returned to the village. The Apache tribe watched silently as Elias was tended to, bleeding, bruised, and utterly exhausted. Yet their eyes held respect. The chief nodded, acknowledging the man who had chosen to protect their land, their trust, and their honor. Elias looked at Tuckoda, who simply said, "You are one of us now, in spirit." For the first time in years, Elias felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel: peace. He had survived the storm, the deserters, and his own inner demons. And through it all, he had found an unexpected ally, a bond stronger than any gold, richer than any treasure. The canyon held its secrets. The gold remained untouched. The desert stretched vast and empty outside the village. But inside Elias's heart, something had shifted forever. He knew life on the frontier would remain unforgiving. There would be more storms, more danger, more choices that tested the limits of his courage. But he also knew this. Some moments, some people, and some acts of honor left a mark that time could not erase. And Elias Boone, the man who had walked away from gold, had earned a mark of a lifetime. The morning sun filtered through the lodge walls, painting the room in soft gold. Elias Boone woke slowly, his muscles aching from the fight and the journey, but his heart lighter than it had been in years. The scent of cedar smoke and sweet herbs filled the air. Around him, the Apache tribe moved with quiet purpose, tending fires, preparing meals, and watching him with a mixture of curiosity and respect. He remembered the fight, the deserters, the cliffs, the sheer impossibility of surviving the night. And yet, here he was alive, embraced, at least in part, by the people he had once feared, the people whose sacred land he had honored by walking away from gold 13 years ago. A soft knock at the doorway made him look up. The chief entered, a calm presence in a world of violence and chaos. He held no weapon, only a small carved stick, smooth and worn by time. "You have proven yourself, Elias Boone," the chief said, "not by taking what was not yours, but by protecting what is sacred. That matters more than gold." Elias swallowed hard. He felt a lump rise in his throat. "I didn't do it for praise," he said softly. "I did what I had to." The chief nodded. "And yet, you have taught us that some men can choose honor over greed. That choice, it is remembered." Tuckhoda stepped forward, now more than a warrior, a mentor, a bridge between worlds. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes shone with quiet pride. "The desert remembers you," he said, "and so do we." Elias lay back, exhausted, letting the words wash over him. He had spent so many years running, from grief, from guilt, from failure. And now, at last, he felt the fragile sense of peace that comes only to those who survive the storm and face themselves honestly. 13 years later, the Arizona sun burned bright over a modest ranch. Elias, older, grayer at the temples, but lean and strong, worked the land with quiet determination. Life had not become easy, frontier life never did, but it had become meaningful. He had learned patience, resilience, and the value of trust. A dust cloud appeared on the horizon. Horses, riders, not settlers, not bandits. The figures moved with confidence, purpose. Elias straightened, heart quickening. When they drew closer, he recognized the familiar figure of Tuckhoda, now older, braided hair, streaked with gray, eyes still sharp and commanding. Beside him rode a small delegation of Apache, faces solemn, expressions respectful. Elias's heart tightened. Memories of the canyon, the gold, the storm, and the fight surged like waves. He felt his hands tremble, not with fear, but with anticipation. Tuckhoda dismounted, walking forward, a small pouch in his hand. The chief, who had accompanied him, carried a ceremonial blanket and a carved wooden figure. "This is for you," Tuckhoda said, holding out the pouch. Elias took it carefully. Inside, gold flakes shimmered faintly in the sunlight. Not enough to make a fortune, but enough to symbolize something far greater: trust, honor, and remembrance. The chief spoke next. "You left our land untouched. You respected what was sacred. For that, we repay you, not for wealth, but for your choices. These gifts honor the man who chose integrity over temptation." Elias's eyes filled with tears. He unfolded the blanket, feeling the weight of history, culture, and gratitude woven into every fiber. The carved wooden figure depicted a man walking upright, head held high, a symbol of courage and honor. He knelt, overwhelmed by emotion. I don't know what to say," he whispered. "I never thought." Tuckhoda laid a hand on his shoulder. "Say nothing. Actions speak louder than words. You've lived them." Elias looked out over the desert, horizon wide and endless. The sun sparkled on the dry washes, cliffs rising like ancient sentinels. He thought of the storm, the canyon, the hollow, and the gold he had left behind. He thought of the battles, the blood, the fear, the friendship forged in violence and survival. And he understood something profound. Some treasures are not meant to be taken. Some wealth is measured in trust earned, in lives saved, in honor preserved. He stood slowly, holding the pouch and the carved figure close. Tuckhoda and the chief stepped back, allowing him this moment of private reflection. The wind blew softly, carrying the scent of cedar and dust, of life and memory. Elias spoke, voice steady but filled with gratitude. "I will carry this always." Tuckhoda nodded. "And we will remember you. Always." The riders mounted and began to leave. Elias watched them go, knowing that life would continue, harsh and unpredictable as ever. But he no longer feared the storms. He had faced death, betrayal, and loss. He had chosen honor when no one was watching, and that choice had returned to him, not as gold alone, but as a testament to resilience, courage, and the bonds that endure across time. The desert stretched wide, endless, unforgiving, but alive with memory and respect. Elias felt a weight lift from his shoulders. 13 years of life, hardship, and growth had led him here. He knew there would be more trials, more challenges, more decisions that demanded courage. But now, he had a standard, a measure, and a story that would carry him forward. And as the sun dipped low, painting the horizon in fiery oranges and deep purples, Elias Boone felt a peace that was hard-earned, honest, and lasting. In the harsh deserts of the Wild West, choices define men more than gold ever could. Elias Boone chose honor over greed, trust over temptation, and in return, he earned something far more valuable than riches. What would you do if no one was watching? Remember, your choices matter. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more true Wild West adventures, stories of courage, honor, and a human spirit that endure across time.